This occurred in 2017 and it's 100% true. Due to a multitude of factors including a recent death of a close friend, I was unbearably depressed at this time of my life. For that reason, my family flew across the country to visit me in LA where I live, and we thought it would be nice to visit Catalina Island. When we arrived, it became apparent to us that it was the off-season. It was late November and the weather was cold, and as a result, the island was nearly empty besides locals and a few straggling tourists such as ourselves. My first priority was to ditch our luggage so we could explore the island, so we immediately checked into our motel. Though that word hardly does the place any justice. I call it a motel because all the doors of the rooms exited to the outside, but in actuality, our room was one of 20 to 30 quaint guest house looking buildings, arranged in a sort of horseshoe shape around a walkway, with rooms on either side of the path. The entrance to the motel was essentially one of the points of the horseshoe, and if you walked dead straight, you would reach the room that we were given, essentially on the corner before you have to go right to go further into the horseshoe. So from our room, one path led back to the street, the other one further into these secluded maze of rooms. Now stay with me. After a day of exploring and having just finished up dinner, it was time for the cold, dark walk back to the room. Catalina Island is a decent distance from the mainland, and let me just say, it gets dark. Similarly dark was my headspace after the dinner conversation took a left-hand turn, and my overwhelming depression got the best of me. I pulled my black hoodie tighter over my freezing ears and walked ahead of my parents to the hotel room, telling them that I just needed to go to sleep. And I did immediately. Depression sometimes makes that easy. I was already losing consciousness as they had entered after me, drifting off without so much as a good night. I then woke up to my mom saying my name, a harsh whisper. The room had 2 beds, and my parents' bed was closer to the door, and mine was further in the room. My mom's voice cut through the silence again. She sounded concerned for me. I didn't blame her considering my mental state at the time. Groggy, I rolled over her. "What?" I asked. As my eyes adjusted to the dim moonlight coming in through the curtains, I saw her turn to face me. She was surprised to see me in my bed. Her eyes got wide. If I'm in my bed, who is she talking to? We both looked back to where she was previously looking to see, a hooded figure in all black standing over their bed. Now I know that you're reading this and knowing a creepy thing is going to happen, but understand how horrifically startling it would be to be on an island in the middle of the ocean and wake up to see a hooded figure looming over you. This moment seemed to last forever. Now life isn't like movies where characters unleash a blood-curdling scream. Sometimes the only thing that comes out is something panicked and guttural. My mom's words became low and severe as she said my dad's name in a dire voice that I had never heard her use before. And then the hooded figure did something so bizarre and unsettling. It didn't advance towards us, but instead, it crouched in the corner near where it stood. The way that it crouched was so absolutely unexpected, even in regards to this already unexpected situation, that it terrified me. It seemed animalistic. I knew 2 things. The hooded figure had been standing over us sleeping, and it's not acting in any sort of way that I can understand, as opposed to the infinite moment of this figure standing over us mere seconds ago. The series of events that unfolded when my hulking, ex-military dad woke up happened in an instant. Suddenly we were out of the door, not knowing which way the intruder went. My mom was screaming, "Get him, get him!" My dad was running down one path of the horseshoe, further into the hotel, shouting through sheer adrenaline, "I'm going to kill you." I ran down the other path towards the street. When I got there, not a sign of the intruder, but it became suspiciously quiet behind me. I ran back to the room to find my dad quietly walking back, his head hung low. He gets really close to me and I hear him say, "It's a freaking kid." The explanation that he said was it was some young teen who was tall and lengthy as I am in my 20s, wearing all black including a black hoodie, and he'd gone into the wrong room, our room. The one time my parents had just so happened to forget to lock the door. My mom woke up when he had entered and seeing a tall person in a black hoodie, she thought that it was me, assumingly leaving the room in a depressive episode. And when the hooded figure had crouched, that was him realizing his mistake and panicking. He was scared of us. As I got back to the room, my mom walked out and hugs this kid, who's now crying his eyes out. I would be too if a massive ex-soldier was sprinting after me with a murder in his eyes. Since this has happened months ago and his verdict has already been sentenced, I am safe talking about my encounter with this creep. It's not so much a scary story as much as a word of warning to young people to not come near cars because the situation could have been worse if I hadn't subconsciously protected myself. The setting. I work in a big tourist town and we have this neat little shopping place that's kind of like an outside mall, with restaurants and activities for kids and adults. Its parking lot is next to it and it's so big that the place uses a tram to transport people back and forth from the center to the different parking lot sections. It's also sharing the parking lot to our city's new, huge convention center where we have car shows, anime cons, or different events going on pretty much all year long. So pretty often, people mistake the parking lot for the convention center, and they're not knowing that it's for our location too. I work in the shopping center as a massage therapist for a big company and I have to park in the D parking because all employees must do so because it is the closest without being inconvenient for customers. Oftentimes in the morning, we don't have a lot of people parking and most of the cars there are employees walking to work for the day. Now, I used to come super early to work since my roommate would often get rides with me on her way to her own work. Because of this, I was able to grab some breakfast at a fast food place and sit in my car in my work's parking lot to enjoy some radio and pancakes. On this morning, I was enjoying my breakfast when I see a car drive around mine and the driver stared at me. I was confused but thought nothing of it and went back to eating. The car circled a second time and stopped in front of me. This caught my attention and I stared at him as he motioned for me to come out. Now this is where I was pretty stupid. Because of the mistakes of the parking lot, I thought the guy was lost and in need of directions, and because I'm from the happy old South, I'm genuinely a nice and kind person. I've had questions like this many times before, and I would always help people figure things out since we are still a very new shopping center. I get out of my car and I walk over to his, but thankfully my subconscious brain is screaming at me. I left my door wide open and I went to the passenger window instead of the driver's side. It was as if I knew something was up, but consciously was too kind-hearted to think anything would happen. His window rolled down about an inch or two. The person that I was looking at seemed to be in his young 20s and had a trashy car that made a weird clunking noise as it drove. It was a piece of crap, but you can't always afford the best cars in this economy. "Hey, do you need help?" He muttered something that I can't understand. Maybe a good morning or how are you? "I'm sorry. How old are you?" I was confused and maybe realizing the guy was asking for my number or something. "I'm 28. The creep then pulled his pants down to show off his very obviously happy you-know-what to me, with a smirk on his face. Never seen anything like this before. My brain went dead. I couldn't believe that I was being publicly flashed by a total stranger in the early morning before work. I was more stunned than horrified and held up my hand with my wedding band on it and said along the lines like, "I'm married," and backed off to my car. The creep drove off as I sat back into my seat, and for a split second I was gonna brush this off. Heck no. I quickly grabbed my pen on my dash and wrote down his license plate, and I called the police. I told the operator what had happened and described everything as best as I could. They told me an officer would be sent down to the parking lot. All the while, the creep was circling the other lots as if he was patrolling the place. I suddenly realized he was trying to find other people to do this to. And Lord knows what else if there was a young teen just coming in for her weekend job or something. I packed up my stuff and walked out to head to work, hearing that dang clunky noise. I got my phone out and snapped a few pictures of the car, just in case the tram guys passed by and I could show them to look out for this guy. Luckily, as he passed by one direction, the police came the opposite way a second later. I yelled at them to stop and pointed to where he had drove off. They told me to stay there and another officer would come to take my statement. I texted my group work chat to tell them that I would be late because the police were involved and I spoke with an officer when he came up. He asked if I was going to press charges and I said that I wasn't sure because I had never done this before and that this has never happened to me. He spoke seriously to me, someone concerned about not only my well-being but the well-being of others. He might do this again to others or even escalate. I knew that was true because I remember the way he was patrolling around the parking lot. I ended up writing his statement and filing my very first police report. Just as they said, they caught the creep, and they were bringing him to us so I could positively ID him. It turns out they got the right guy, and I pointed to him telling the cops that was the man who exposed himself to me. You would think that I would end this, but as I said, he was in court and I was present as the victim. A few months later, I was summoned to court to provide evidence to the victim's representative, and he would be giving his plea. If he pled not guilty, he would have a trial, and if he pled guilty, he would be judged then and there. I was nervous because I started to wonder if he didn't plead out that if anyone would believe me. At this time, I also found out that I was pregnant, and I didn't want to stress anymore, so I and my parents come with me as support. The creep was there and in tow was his mother, I presumed, and a girl holding his hand like a girlfriend would. That surprised and sickened me. They didn't really look at us much, and I didn't want to be around him, so I stuck close to my parents. It took forever for the case to be heard, and when it did, the creep went up there and I heard so much more than just my charges against him. Not only was he charged with exposing himself to me, he was found on camera at the community center doing lewd things, and when he was arrested, he had a grandma pot on him and a pipe just sitting on the dashboard. The car also smelled like he had been smoking in it. My shock was intensified when I found out his real age. He was only 20. 20. He was going about like that, being that young. The creep tried to urge that he hadn't exposed himself purposely to me. Oh no, he was just fixing his pants, yeah. I've seen men adjust their pants and it wasn't like what he did. I couldn't believe this was his argument. The judge wasn't having it. Do you have a problem keeping your pants on, young man? No, sir. Thankfully, the creep took a plea since he probably had no chance of proving that he was innocent at all. I was glad because the thought of a trial while I was pregnant didn't sound great to me. The sentence for the creep, who by the way lives outside of our state: 2 years probation, 2 years of community service, classes in sex therapy, 48 hours in jail along with a fine, restraining order to never set foot on our premises ever again. If he's arrested a second time, he'll have to serve 18 months in jail. All in all, I felt like I did the right thing versus just choosing to brush it off. Hopefully the guy can get some kind of help and not do this to people simply just trying to go to work in peace. This takes place about 2 or 3 years ago when I was in university. I lived on an island and our university was in a very small village, town in the mountains, where literally nothing ever happened. The crime rate on the island is pretty low. My friends and I used to overthink a whole lot, so when we stumbled upon something out of the ordinary, we would immediately freak out. It was in the middle of winter and our classes ended at around 6, so it was already dark outside. I told my friends to come by my place to have dinner and watch American Horror Story. My flat was on the second floor and had a window that directly faced the property's parking lot. I could basically see if anyone was entering or leaving the property. We saw a car pull up in the parking lot, and it never turned its headlights off for the rest of the evening. We were having fun and I didn't think too much of it, thinking that someone must have just forgotten to turn their headlights off. That's a bummer. My friends started to leave one by one except for one of them, who stayed a little bit later. It was around 1 a.m. and the car was still there with its headlights on. It had been there since 6 p.m. We had a weird feeling about this somehow. My friend left and I closed my blinds so I didn't have eyes on the car anymore, and immediately got ready for bed. I knew that my friend had to pass by the car to leave the property, so she eventually checked it out. She called me a few minutes later after she had left, freaking out, telling me that there was a girl in the car, not moving at all, with her eyes wide open, sitting in the front seat. I told her to come back to my place to figure it out. She passed by the car twice, so I'm pretty convinced that what she saw was real, even though she had a pretty large imagination, but I wanted to check it out as well. She was really freaking out and told me that she wasn't going out there again, so I turned my phone's flashlight on and went to check out the car alone. My friend opened the blinds to check on me and called me, so we were on the phone the whole time. The parking lot was right next to a construction site where they were building a new research unit for the campus, and there was a huge open garage where I imagined trucks parked for deliveries. It was empty at night. I went to check the car out to see if the girl was okay, and as soon as I had approached it, the car got the heck out of the parking lot, maneuvered next to me, and started to pull back into the pitch black garage, and then it turned its headlights off. I didn't see the girl at all because the headlights were blinding me, but I now knew that she wasn't dead or anything. I hesitated going into that garage. I really wanted to know what was going on. My friend on the phone told me to get the heck back into the flat. It was a crazy thought, but geez, what the heck had just happened? I hurried back to my flat, and my friend and I tried to figure out what really happened. We thought about calling the police, but we figured it wasn't good enough reason. I'm pretty sure that the girl was stalking someone. I really don't have any other explanation. But the point of stalking someone is being discreet, right? Why the heck would she have left her headlights on the whole time that she was there? My friend was too scared to go past again, so I offered that she stay the night, and I peeked out of the blinds from time to time throughout the night, and eventually saw the car back up into the same parking spot again. It kept us awake for a little while, thinking that we had seen a ghost, and making up other theories about what we saw, but we eventually fell asleep. The car was gone in the morning.